In the busy town of Akuku, there was a famous woman called Madame Shade. She had the biggest food shop and everyone loved her food. People came from faraway places just to eat at her restaurant. Husbands stopped eating at home and wives didn't bother cooking anymore because Madame Shade's food was too tasty. Her shop became so popular that other food sellers couldn't get customers and had to close their shops. Madame Shade's place was always full, and people even argued about who would go in first. She sold all kinds of food, local dishes like swallows, and fancy meals like buffets. The workers were always neat and polite to everyone who came. There's hardly anything not to love about the restaurant, except for one peculiar policy. Madame Shade has a strict no takeaway rule. Even our workers are not allowed to take any food home. Leftovers from customers' plates aren't discarded, but are instead meticulously packed in yellow bags at the end of the day. These leftovers are reserved for Madame Shade's dogs at home. One evening, Madame Shade and her manager Fola were talking to the new boys and girls who would start working in her busy restaurant. Among them were Bolaji and Uche, two best friends in their 20s. They both dreamed of owning a big restaurant like Madame Shade's one day. They were so happy and excited as Madame Shade gave her speech and instructions. In this shop, Madame Shade said, customers are like kings and we must treat them well. If anyone is rude or misbehaves, they will lose their job. I don't like thieves, so no stealing is allowed. And most importantly, no one is allowed to take food out of this restaurant, not even if the pots are full of food. No food leaves this place. The new workers looked at each other surprised. Yes, she's serious, Fola added. Even if you forget every other rule, don't forget this one. And do you know why? Have any of you heard of food poisoning or food safety? Some of the workers shook their heads. Good, Fola said. Food poisoning happens when food isn't handled properly and it makes people sick. We have a big shop and a name to protect. If someone takes food out and something happens, they might blame us. We can't allow that. Do you all understand? The workers nodded. You are allowed to eat as much as you want here, but no food should leave the shop, Madame Shade said firmly. You will all start work tomorrow, Fola announced. Now follow me to get your uniforms. He led the new workers into his office to prepare for their first day. The next day, Bolaji and Uche were the first to arrive among the new workers. They met the older staff who were already busy getting things ready for the day. As the sun rose, the restaurant started to fill up and people began to line up for food. Everyone got very busy. Uche was assigned to clean the tables while Bolaji was helping in the kitchen with food preparation. While Uche was cleaning a used table, a customer called out to her, Hey sister, can you help me with this tap? I think it's blocked and I need to wash my hands. I'm done eating. Uche went over to check and saw that someone had stuffed the tap with a hard tissue, making it impossible to use. Sorry about that, sir, Uche said politely. The place is so full right now and it might take time to find another sink. If you don't mind, I can bring you a bowl and some water to wash your hands here. That's fine, the man said. Quickly, Uche ran to fetch a bowl and water. The customer washed his hands, thanked her, and left the restaurant. Uche then cleared his table and took the dirty plates to the washing area. Just as she was about to pour the water from the bowl away, she heard a loud voice behind her. What nonsense are you trying to do? Startled, Uche turned around and saw one of the older staff members. The woman looked upset. What are you talking about? Uche asked, confused. Nobody told you we don't pour hand-washed water away? The woman asked sternly. How did you even know it was hand-washed water? Uche asked. I saw you when you collected the water from the customer. What were you thinking? The older staff replied. You better not let anyone else know what you did today. I don't understand, Uche said. I was just trying to help. I know, the older staff said, but in this shop, customers must wash their hands only in the basin. Why is that? Uche asked, still confused. I don't know, the older staff admitted. Maybe it's for hygiene reasons, but if you know what's good for you, go and pour the water into one of the basins inside. That's the rule. Uche did as the older staff told her, but she still felt puzzled by all the strict rules in the restaurant. After closing time, as the girls walked home together, Uche decided to tell Bolaji everything that had happened. She explained how she got scolded for trying to pour out the hand washing water and how strange she thought the rule was. Bolaji laughed. What's so suspicious about that, Uche? I think Madam Shade just wants the place to stay clean. You heard the manager during our training. She's super neat. And the restaurant follows strict rules for cleanliness. Just do as they say. But Bolaji, Uche said, lowering her voice, how can our dogs eat all the leftover food? You've seen the amount of food customers leave behind. It's enough to feed a whole zoo. And she takes the food home to the dogs every single day. Don't you think something is off? Plus, why does she even need that many dogs? Bolaji thought for a moment and then said, well, maybe she keeps so many dogs for companionship. Not everyone has people around to make them happy. What do you mean? Uche asked, curious. Think about it, Bolaji replied. Her son and husband left her a long time ago. Maybe those dogs are the only ones keeping her company after we all go home for the night. So people just love animals and they make them happy. My grandpa had 7 dogs before he passed away and he treated them like family. So I personally don't see anything wrong with Madame Shadi having that many dogs. Uche sighed and said, well, if you don't agree with me, I hear you. She shook her head, still unsure about the whole situation. Uche, just focus on why we are here, Bolaji said, giving her friend a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Stop overthinking things, okay? We have jobs now, and that's what matters. Then Bolaji gave Uche a big hug. I'll see you tomorrow, she said as she turned into her street and headed home. The next day, the restaurant was as busy as ever, filled with people. Bolaji, who had just managed to get a short break after working so hard since morning, was about to sit down and eat her food when she heard a loud commotion coming from outside the window. Curious, she stood up to see what was happening and noticed Akin, the security man, arguing with a customer. Bolaji decided to step outside and find out what was wrong. Oga Akin, what's going on here? Bolaji asked. Akin turned to her and said, good, you are here. Go and call the manager for me. Bolaji shook her head and replied, he's not in the office. He went out earlier with Madam Shadi. The customer, a woman, was holding a wrapped plate of food and trying to leave, but Akin was stopping her. Madam, you can't leave with that food. It's against the rules, Bolaji said calmly. The woman looked upset and almost in tears. Please, my daughter is very sick and lying in the hospital down the road. We are not from this town. We're just traveling and she fell ill. This is the closest place that sells her favorite meal. She needs to eat so she can take her medicine. Please, please help me. Bolaji felt bad for the woman and could see how desperate she was. Akin, please, let her go with the food. This is an emergency, Bolaji pleaded. Akin looked worried. Bolaji, I can't do that. If the manager finds out, we will both be in big trouble. Bolaji reassured him. The manager isn't here. And I'll take the blame if anything happens. This is a special case. She's not from here. And Madam Shade will understand when we explain. After hesitating for a moment, Akin finally allowed the woman to leave with the food. All right, he said, shaking his head. But you are the one who told her to go. If this leads to any trouble, it's on you. I can't afford to lose my job. Bolaji nodded, understanding the risk, and watched as the woman hurried away, thankful for the help. A few hours later, Madame Shade stormed into the kitchen where Bolaji and the other staff were working. She looked furious. What did you do today? She shouted. Everyone froze, scared and confused. I'm talking to you, Bolaji. Answer me. Madame Shade's eyes were burning with anger. Bolaji, trembling, whispered, nothing, ma. Nothing, ma. Nothing? Madame Shade moved closer, raising her hand as if she was going to slap Bolaji. You want to ruin my business? I don't want to see you in this shop again. Bolaji's eyes filled with tears as she fell to her knees. Please, ma. I can explain. I was just trying to help. I don't care. Madame Shade snapped. Get out of my shop this instant. She turned to the manager. I don't want to see her here another minute. The manager quickly grabbed Bolaji and dragged her out of the restaurant. Leave this place. Bolaji tried to beg, but no one dared speak for her. Uche, hearing what had happened, rushed outside to find her friend. Bolaji, still crying, told Uche everything. Stop crying, Uche said. We'll beg her. You know she's a nice woman. She's just angry right now. Let her cool off and we'll talk to her later. Just wait around until closing time. Bolaji wiped her tears and nodded. She walked away from the restaurant, hoping and praying that Madame Shade would forgive her. After everyone had left and the shop was closed, Uche and Bolaji went to Madame Shade's house, which was just behind the restaurant. Uche and Bolaji stood outside Madame Shade's house, exchanging nervous glances. The air was thick with an eerie silence, and the dim glow of the street lights barely illuminated the weathered iron gate before them. The house itself loomed in the darkness, an old, sprawling mansion with high walls that seemed to swallow all sound. I don't think this is a good idea, Bolaji whispered, her voice barely audible. We have to do this, Uche replied, though her own voice trembled. You could lose your job. If we beg her, she might forgive you. Summoning courage, Bolaji pushed the rusted gate open. It let out a long, agonizing creak, shattering the quiet like a scream. They hesitated for a moment before stepping into the compound. The air smelled strange, like something rotten mixed with burning incense. The house was even more imposing up close. Its dark windows stared at them like empty eye sockets, and a single dim light flickered from within. Let's just go in, beg her, and leave, Uche muttered. They approached the heavy wooden door, but before Bolaji could knock, a sound froze them in place. A low guttural whimper, then a soft, choking sob. Bolaji's breath hitched. She turned to Uche, whose face had gone pale. The sound was coming from the side of the house. Without thinking, she stepped off the front porch and crept toward the dimly lit window, Uche reluctantly following behind. Peering through a gap in the dusty curtains, Bolaji felt her stomach lurch. Madame Shade knelt on the floor, rocking back and forth, tears streaming down her face. Her expensive buba and wrapper were disheveled, her gele barely clinging to her head, but that wasn't the terrifying part. She wasn't alone. Around her stood massive figures, half human, half dog. Their bodies were twisted in unnatural ways, hunched over with elongated limbs. Their faces were distorted, partially human, partially canine. Their glowing eyes locked onto Madame Shade. Thick saliva dripped from their jaws, staining the wooden floor beneath them. Madame Shade clutched her head, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, I did what you asked. I fed you. I gave you what you wanted. Why are you still tormenting me? She wailed, her voice cracking. One of the creatures took a slow step forward, its claws scraping against the floor. It tilted its head, letting out a deep growl that sent shivers down Bolaji's spine.
You failed us, Shaggy.
A voice rasped, low, guttural, not entirely human. Bolaji felt bile rise in her throat. Uche's grip on her arm tightened painfully, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, as if sensing their presence, one of the creature's head snapped towards the window. Bolaji's heart stopped. The creature's eyes locked onto hers. For a second, there was silence. Then, a deafening snarl. Run! Uche hissed, yanking her arm. They turned and bolted, nearly tripping over themselves as they sprinted back toward the gate. The growls grew louder behind them, followed by the sound of heavy clawed footsteps pounding against the ground. They reached the gate, fumbling with the rusted latch. Bolaji's hands shook violently as she struggled to yank it open. The snarls were getting closer, so close she could feel hot breath on her neck. Bolaji and Uche gasped for breath, their chests rising and falling in frantic rhythm. The street around them was eerily quiet, as if the world itself hadn't noticed the horror they had just escaped from. Bolaji risked a glance back at the gate. Nothing. No creatures, no glowing eyes, just the looming mansion, its dark windows staring back like empty sockets. Then, a slow, deliberate clap. The sound sliced through the silence, measured and mocking. Bolaji's breath caught in her throat as she turned, and there she was, Madame Shadi, standing just a few steps away, poised, perfectly composed. Her gaily sat neatly on her head, her buba and wrapper smooth, untouched, as if she hadn't just been kneeling on the floor, sobbing in terror. She tilted her head slightly, her smile spreading just a fraction wider. Ah, Bolaji, Uche. Her voice was light, almost amused. What brings you here at this hour? Uche staggered back, her hands trembling. Bolaji opened her mouth, but no words came. This wasn't possible. They had just seen her, crying, begging, surrounded
Madam
by
Shadi
those.
smiled.
Her expression as calm as a still lake. Ah, Bolaji, Uche, she said, her voice smooth, unreadable. What brings you here at this hour? Bolaji's throat was dry, her hands trembled. Uche swallowed hard but managed to speak. We we came to beg you, ma, on behalf of Bolaji, please forgive her. A flicker of amusement danced in Madame Shade's eyes, but it vanished just as quickly. She let out a soft chuckle. Is that why you came? She said. No need to worry. I forgive her. She can return to work tomorrow. Bolaji and Uche exchanged uneasy glances. That's it. After everything they had just witnessed. Go home now, Madame Shade continued, her voice gentle. It's late. They hesitated, but something in the way she stood, too poised, too knowing, made them turn and leave. The night air felt colder as they walked away. Their footsteps hurried. Bolaji finally exhaled. I don't think I can go back there, she whispered. Uche nodded. I don't even know what we just saw. But we saw it. We have to tell someone. And say what? Bolaji snapped. That our boss has monsters in our house? That she was crying and begging creatures that looked like half dog, half human spirits? Who will even believe us? Madame Shade is loved in this community. She gives food to the poor, helps families. Nobody will believe she's hiding something. Uche stopped walking. So, what? We just quit our jobs and stay silent about what we saw? Bolaji turned to her, her voice shaking. Do you think she'll just let us go after what we saw? I don't think so. Uche inhaled sharply. Exactly why we need to find out the truth. We need to know what's really going on. Bolaji shook her head. No, I'm not returning. Fine. Uche looked at her disappointed. Good night, Bolaji. Bolaji walked away without looking back. The next morning, Uche arrived at their usual meeting point near the bus stop. Her heart was heavy. Bolaji won't come back. I'll have to do this alone. She was about to leave when she heard footsteps. She turned. Bolaji was standing there waiting. Uche's eyes widened. I thought you weren't coming. Bolaji sighed. I'm scared. But I can't let you do this alone. A small, relieved smile crossed Uche's face. We do this together, Bolaji said firmly, and we stay safe. Uche nodded, together. And with that, they walked towards the restaurant. At the restaurant, the other workers were surprised to see Bolaji back. However, the girls paid no attention to their surprise. Instead, they started telling them what they saw the previous night. The staff looked amused and laughed at them. Hey, so you're saying you saw spirits in her house, and she allowed you to return in one piece? She even forgave you and allowed you to work here again? One of the workers scoffed. I thought you girls were nice people. But because Madame Shade corrected you over something you did wrong, you think it's okay to tarnish her name and business? You both are very ungrateful. They hissed and walked away, leaving the girls standing as they continued their morning routine, preparing to open the shop for the day. Bolaji looked at Uche. I told you nobody will believe us. What are we going to do now? We don't even know exactly what is going on apart from what we've seen. I know, Uche said. But we can't give up. We need to find out what she's hiding. Bolaji frowned. I don't trust her. I'm sure she saw us yesterday. But why is she acting so nice? I don't know, Bolaji. But I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of this whether people believe us or not. In the following days, Bolaji and Uche kept thinking of ways to uncover the truth. But Madame Shade's sudden kindness towards them made them feel even more uncertain. However, things at the shop were not the same. Customers didn't come as often as they used to, and those who did started complaining about a rotten smell in the air. Even the workers perceived it and tried everything to clean the place. But the foul, offensive odor remained. Uche and Bolaji found it strange, and it only fueled their curiosity. One day, Bolaji said, "Don't you think we should inform my uncle? He just got back from the city. You know he isn't blinded by love for Madame Sade like the rest of the people in this town. That's a good idea. He's an elder and he will know better." The girls went ahead and explained everything to Uncle Wale. He found it strange and nobody believed them and warned them to be careful. "You can't go around without evidence," he said. Then he suggested they sneak in a camera to capture proof. The girls were thrilled by the idea and collected the camera from him. They strategized how to plant the camera at work without Madame Shade noticing. Uche suggested placing it where they had stood the night they saw her. "But who will go?" she asked. Bolaji looked at her. "Both of us. I can't go alone. Never." Uche looked scared but eventually agreed. During the busy hours of the shop, they sneaked out and placed the camera inside Madame Shade's house. The following day, Madame Shade looked extremely pale when she returned to the shop. The workers were surprised to see her in that condition. She coughed slightly and reassured them. "I'm fine. It's just a cold. I've taken my medicine." "Are the customers not coming today?" she asked Fola. "They didn't come, ma." She looked sad but quickly put on a smile. "It's okay. Some days are like that in business. Call Bolaji and Uche for me." Fola did as she was told. When the girls arrived at her office, Madame Shade smiled weakly and coughed again. She looked very sick and pale. The girls exchanged glances, curiosity evident in their eyes. "My darlings," she said, "I got you both some nice fruits. Also, I spoke to a friend about your plans to open your own shop and she's ready to help." The girls looked at each other in shock. "Thank you," they muttered, collecting the fruits. Outside, Bolaji turned to Uchi. "What is going on?" "I don't know, but I'm not eating any of this fruit," Uche said, dropping it on the table. "Why has she been trying to give gifts and food these days?" Bolaji said, looking at the fruit on the table. "Let's go and retrieve the camera." They sneaked back into Madame Shade's house and retrieved the camera. At home, they watched its contents with Uncle Wale and they were horrified by what they saw. Madame Shade was rolling on the ground, screaming as if she was being flogged. Her skin tore, revealing blood, but no one was touching her. "This is enough evidence that something is wrong with her," Uncle Wale said. Uche looked at Bolaji. "No wonder she looked so sick today." Uncle Wale stood up. "We are going to that shop tomorrow together." The next day, as they approached the restaurant, a terrible stench filled the air. People stood outside, too scared to go near. "Why has this smell gotten worse? This is unbearable," one of the workers said. "Where is Madame Shade?" someone asked. "She's inside," another replied. Everyone looked at each other in shock. "How can she stay inside this horrible smell?" "Let's bring her out. She's not feeling well," one of the workers suggested. Two workers went in but ran back out in terror. I, I, I have never seen anything like this in my life," one of them stammered. "What is it?" the crowd shouted. "Madame Shadi, she's rotting." "Rotting? What do you mean?" "Her skin is peeling off." Two men went in and managed to bring her out. She was still alive, but her body was decaying before their eyes. Some people gasped in horror, while others whispered among themselves, "Who is doing this to her? Someone must have placed a curse on her," a woman cried. Uncle Wale stepped forward. "Nobody did this to her. She brought this upon herself." Everyone turned to him in shock. "What do you mean?" Bolaji stepped forward. "Yes, it's true. And we have proof. She needs to tell us everything so we can help her." Fola turned to Madame Shade, who was crying in pain. "Madame Shade, what is going on?" Fola asked, her voice filled with urgency. Madame Shade looked around, shaking her head. She let out a weak, bitter laugh before murmuring, "Is this the end?" Then she took a deep breath and began to speak. "It's true. No one is behind what's happening to me. I caused this myself. I went to seek something from the devil." Gasps filled the air. "I wanted to be rich and famous after my husband abandoned me. He ran away with my son to be with his rich girlfriend. I was bitter, betrayed. I told myself I would never be belittled again. So I sought power, the kind that would make me the greatest cook. The kind that would draw people to my restaurant, and as they dined, their glory and riches would become mine. A horrified silence fell over the crowd. The dogs in my house, they are not just dogs, they are spirits. I fed them leftovers from customers' plates, the water from the washed hands. In return, they brought me wealth and stole the destinies of those who ate here. Some people gasped, while others moved forward angrily as if to attack her. But Wale stepped in, raising his hand. Let her finish, he said. Madame Shade's voice wavered. I know I did wrong, but I was blinded by money, fame, and the respect that came with it. Everything fell apart when Bolaji gave out food from my restaurant. No food was ever supposed to leave this place. It angered the spirits. I begged, but they were furious. They demanded a sacrifice. That's why I was kind to you girls. I planned to use you to appease them. Uche and Bolaji froze in shock. I tried to poison you both, Madame Shadi confessed. But every time you refused to eat, I ran out of time. The spirits abandoned me and left me like this, rotting, decaying. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry. I truly am. But the crowd was unmoved. You are wicked, someone shouted. You have destroyed so many lives. She must die, another voice roared. Suddenly, Madame Shade started coughing violently, blood spilling from her lips. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest. Wale looked at her, then at the crowd. No, he said firmly. Death is too easy a punishment. Murmurs of agreement spread among the people. Lock her inside the restaurant, someone suggested. Let her rot in the very place she built on evil. Without another word, they dragged her back inside. She screamed, begging for mercy, but no one listened. They shut the doors, sealing her fate. Outside, people whispered among themselves. Oh, what kind of world is this? One woman muttered. Who can we even trust? Another asked. No one had an answer. They all turned to their home, thinking of what they had lost. As Uche and Bolaji looked back at the once thriving restaurants, now abandoned and silent, they knew Akoko would never be the same again. The town had learned a painful lesson. Not all success is pure, and not every meal is just food. Madame Shadi's cries faded into the night, but her story would live on, whispered from mother to child, traveler to stranger. Her hunger for power had turned into a curse, and now she would rot in the very place where she once thrived. Bolaji shuddered. Who knows how many people lost their destinies here? Uche exhaled deeply. This is why we must always be careful where we eat and who we trust. Some hands do not serve food, they steal lives. And with that, they walked away, leaving behind the shadows of greed, never to return. The end.